I seen me a coyote singing in a prairie symphony. I was riding my horse down by the Rio Grande, and I seen me a cowboy, cowboy, cowboy riding towards me. Giddy up. Hey there, film aficionados. Welcome to the very first episode of Films with Dr. T. I'm Seamus, and on this channel we're going to take a look at films and movies that you may want to take a second look at. So, seeing as this is my very first film with Dr. T, I thought I'd like to start out with one of my favorite movies of all time, Joe Versus the Volcano. I don't remember exactly when I first discovered Joe Versus the Volcano. I feel like it might have been when I was working at Blockbuster back around 2000, 2001. So anyways, I came across this title labeled Joe Versus the Volcano. I thought, wow, that's an interesting name. Joe Versus the Volcano. Volcano. So anyways, I raised my eyebrow when I first saw that. Somehow or another I heard that it was not very good. And I was like, well, it's Tom Hanks, and he's going up against a volcano. I got to check this out at the very least. And it's got Meg Ryan. So, long story short, I watched the film, and I was entranced immediately. I loved it right away. Let's go ahead and dive in and take a look, and I'll show you why this is one of the best movies I can recommend to you.
If you see me coming, better step aside. A lot of men didn't.
The film opens up with Joe arriving to his terrible, horrible, no good, very bad job. He is one of many fellow zombie employees at this corporation. The work environment is very terrible. It's drab, it's gray, it's bad lighting, and he suffers under a very manipulative boss. So Joe, feeling bad every day, not feeling well, decides to go to the doctor. Doctor gives him some not good news.
You have a brain cloud.
Brain cloud?
There's a black fog of tissue running right down the center of your brain.
Wait, what? That's not on WebMD. So, weighing his options, Joe decides to quit his job in a fabulous way and to ask Dee Dee out, who's the woman that he's been working with. She look a little familiar to you? The next day, Joe's in his very drab apartment, and who shows up but a zany billionaire who has a job offer for Joe.
I want to hire you to jump into a volcano.
Joe decides to take him up on the offer. He goes and gets himself a Queer Eye level makeover and then flies out to L.A. Once in L.A., he meets Angelica Granamore. This is the daughter of the zillionaire that he's taken a job with. We do learn a new word.
I'm a flibbertigibbet.
The next morning, Angelica takes Joe on the next leg of his journey, meeting Patricia Granamore.
That's your half-sister?
Yeah.
You're starting to see a pattern here. It's suspicious. Patricia is the captain of this little boat, the Tweedledee, and she's going to escort Joe to the South Seas island of Waponi Woo.
All I know about Waponi Woo is that the name means little island with a big volcano, and that the people, the Waponis, like orange soda.
However, things go a little awry when a typhoon shows up, knocks Patricia into the ocean, lightning strikes the boat, sinking the boat. It's okay, though, because Joe's got some very fortuitous trunks. So for the next few days, Joe and Patricia are adrift at sea on their little raft. Fortunately, just before it succumbs to exposure, Patricia wakes up, and with impeccable timing, the Waponis show up to rescue them and escort them to the island of Waponi Woo. Hijinks ensue as the Waponis nurse Joe and Patricia back to health in, one evening, and then they prepare to escort Joe to his doom and their survival. And of course, he jumps right into the volcano, but not before Patricia declares her love for him. That's exactly what Frozen taught us to be leery about. Finally, it's time for Joe and now Patricia to jump. They leap. I'm not going to tell you what happens next. Just kidding. Of course I will. The Big Woo rejects them and then sinks into the ocean. Joe and Patricia are in the water, except those trunks. Joe and Patricia again make their new raft, discuss Joe's fatal condition, a brain cloud, but he and Patricia work out that this was all a setup from her dad.
I'm relieved. That's great. I'm saved.
They float into the moonset happily ever after.
Nice. Very nice.
Now that you have a sense about how the movie unfolds, let's talk about who's in the film. First, of course, there's the lead guy, that one guy. What's his name? He looks so familiar. I'm just playing, guys. It's Tom Hanks. Joining Tom on this cast is Meg Ryan. No, sorry, that wasn't what I meant. I meant Meg Ryan. Excuse me, sorry. I meant to say Meg Ryan. All right, well, in any case, she's clearly in this movie taking on 3 roles. It wasn't originally meant to be 3 roles.
John Shanley, when he first wrote Joe Versus the Volcano, did not have one actress in mind. He wrote it for 3 separate actresses.
I don't know. It surprises me that he intended 3 people to play it.
Yeah, well, he said that was his first idea, but then when you came on the scene, then that's when he started. He said it was miraculous that, you know, that when we got...
I love him. I love him for saying that.
And I think that worked out well, as we'll talk about later. One thing I like about Meg Ryan is she always seems to come across as like this super sweet, really nice person in real life. She's kind of like a female Tom Hanks. Well, I guess Tom Hanks could be looked at as the male version of Meg Ryan. So, pretty much everybody else in the film shows up, and they're only in it for like a scene, maybe 2 scenes at the most, and they all bring it. The first one we meet is Dan Hedaya. Dan Hedaya, you may remember from Clueless. I'll tell you, he's got one of the most memorizable and memorable phone call conversations in maybe movie history.
Harry. Yeah, Harry, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job, but can he do the job? Harry. Yeah, Harry, but can he do the job? I know he can get the job.
Joe's benefactor is Samuel Granamore, and I'll tell you, he's played by Lloyd Bridges. For somebody who has 1 scene in this movie, nailed it. I mean, it's just magnificent. I'll tell you what, though, one of my favorite moments is this little gem when he first arrives in Joe's apartment.
Not a nice place you have here, Joe.
Next up is Robert Stack. Now, if you're not familiar with Robert Stack, all you have to do is just look up Unsolved Mysteries. He's got, like, one heck of a delivery style. A couple more faces that are familiar that round out the cast is Abe Vigoda, who, again, he's got a few more scenes than the others. He's the Waponi chief who doesn't want to lose his soul.
It is my soul.
I hope you don't lose it.
So do I.
Now, a fun fact about Abe Vigoda is that he was in Cannonball Run 2, and if you've ever seen The Good Place, you may recognize Cannonball Run 2 is that medium movie that's at Minnie St. Clair's house at the Medium Place. So it may be worth taking a look at. There's Amanda Plummer. She's in the movie as Patricia's second-in-command engineer, I suppose, Dagmar. Next, we have Nathan Lane. I mentioned him because you may have seen him before, or at least heard his voice before. And last and definitely not least is Ossie Davis, who plays Joe's limo driver. The nice thing about his role is it's very subtle, but it's very potent, I would say. Marshall does a good job. He not only guides Joe on his outward transformation, but he also equips Joe with some wisdom and even acts maybe as a sounding board for Joe's burgeoning wisdom in himself. So now let's take a look at what the critics and the audience had to say about this film. It turns out that when I picked out this movie to be the first Films with Dr. T episode, I was expecting it to have a much lower Rotten Tomatoes score. Turns out 63%. That's fairly respectable. It was the audience score, however, that kind of caught my attention. Take a look. It's a lot lower at 54%. Over at Metacritic, it's rated as a mix for average reviews with a normalized score of 45%. So why was it so low, Dr. T? That's a good question. And so what I did was I took a look at the movies that came out that year. Take a look at this. You got The Hunt for Red October. You got Back to the Future 3, Die Hard 2, Dick Tracy, Misery, Edward Frickin' Scissorhands, Space Invaders. What is that doing there? I think they're angling for a Films with Dr. T episode. So I kept looking around, and then I finally watched the trailer, and I realized, now I see what happened. So there were some external factors that hit this movie in the box office. What is so great about Joe versus the Volcano? I'll tell you what. First and foremost, it's a fairy tale. Who doesn't like a fairy tale? Now, you might ask, how can you be sure it's a fairy tale, Dr. T? I'm glad you asked. What is a fairy tale? It's a good question. So I did some searching online, found a 10th grade English teacher who was teaching fairy tale elements earlier this year. And there are a list of characteristics that I kind of pulled off of that list. Number one on the list, you have Once Upon a Time and the end, bookending your movie. This is demonstrated by the opening clip. And the closing clip. And then, of course, you got the music box music that plays over the opening and the closing. There's a good, innocent person in the movie. You know, Joe, played by Tom. I can even play Mr. Rogers, nice guy, Tom Hanks. You have a hero, as described by Mr. Granmore himself.
I had to see the hero in there. You dragged 2 kids down a 6-story burning staircase. Now, that was brave. But then you went back up for the 3rd kid. That was heroic. Come on now, you're a hero!
And yes, this definitely has the hero's journey.
Ah, yes. So, a real journey.
Joe goes on a quest to confront the volcano, jump into it, and save the lives of the Waponi Woo, whether it's a real thing or not. So the MacGuffin of this movie, which is what gets the movie going, is Joe's brain cloud. Although it's not mentioned much for a majority of the film, once the diagnosis is established, it really does hang over Joe's head as the movie goes. A cloud over his head. A brain cloud. Good one. Anyways, most fairy tales that we're familiar with has a damsel in distress, and at first glance you might think Meg is the damsel, but aha, she quickly shows that is not the case actually.
It's my boat!
It's actually Joe. Joe is in distress. Let's take a language snack. In today's word quest, what is a boy damsel? The parent word of damsel is the French word damoiselle, as in mademoiselle. Now, as noted by the user Chris on the Stack Exchange, the male equivalent of damoiselle is damoiseau. So if we anglicize damoiseau, we get damsel. Therefore, Joe is a damsel in distress. He's already losing his soul when we first meet him, and then he's told he's got a fatal brain illness. He's hired, of course, to go on a journey, and along the way he meets unique, interesting characters who help shape his journey. Even Mr. Waturi is the first monster he has to defeat in order to move on to the next level of his journey. And of course, over the course of his journey, he begins to rediscover the joy and value of life, and this culminates in his Help the Moon Rise experience. He faces some monsters, as mentioned, Mr. Waturi. You got the shark, you got the big woo, and even the typhoon. Along the way, he rediscovers his courage. And of course, he marries a princess. That's nice. Now, I know she's not a princess per se, but let's be honest. Today's heiress is yesterday's princess, right? So, Once Upon a Time, the end, check, 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 check. The people that it's been on, yep, check. Now, what about recurring numbers and patterns in the fairy tales, 3, 4, and 7? There are 3 women with suspiciously similar bone structure. There are 4 cultures that make up the Waponi Woo.
Thus was born the Waponi culture, a mixture of Polynesian, Celtic, Hebrew, and Latin influences.
There are 4 trunks that Joe uses as a life raft in his journey. There are 4 significant appearances of the lightning bolt. As for the appearance of the number 7, as it turns out, I haven't quite found a 7 that stood out to me. So if anybody sees the number 7, comment it below and let me know what I missed. So Joe versus the Volcano definitely checks off a lot of marks that suggest that this is a fairy tale and should be approached accordingly.
We talked a little bit before the tape that this is an adult fairy tale, an adventure fairy tale.
Yeah.
I guess I could have just shown you that to begin with. I don't know. The other thing that I really like about Joe versus the Volcano is got some really, really interesting philosophical questions. You see, I've always found that nearly all movies and stories have some nugget of wisdom that you can take into yourself. I mean, we're talking about like a quote or an action that you can take into yourself and use it to sculpt yourself into a better person. Joe versus the Volcano, for me, is chock full of these nuggets.
I see it as a sign of tremendous sophistication that you haven't demanded my name. Or ask me what I'm doing here.
I've always been interested in being like more sophisticated. Maybe not so much more sophisticated, but having the capacity to be more sophisticated, and particularly like in the right situation. And I really like that remark. It's sophistication to recognize it, but it's also sophistication to be that person.
Well, that's the ironic part, really. Mr. Banks, you're a hypochondriac. There's nothing wrong with you that has anything to do with your symptoms. Now, my guess is that your experiences in the fire department were extremely traumatic. You experienced the imminent possibility of death. But the cumulative anxiety of those brushes with death left you habitually fearful about your physical person.
All right, so for me, I am a lifelong member of Hypochondriacs Anonymous, and I am sensitive to Joe's predicament at the start of the film. I do like that Dr. Ellison is at least straightforward enough, Joe, to address his hypochondria. This would be another moment that I found liberating, because realizing that he had so many symptoms that I personally have experienced myself, and that they were related to his hypochondria, you know, that was, again, that's kind of like painting the monster and saying, catch it. And there it is. You can cage it. It's more catchable. It's more manageable.
Because he's never around.
Well, if you're angry with him and he's never around, why are you working for him?
I don't work for him. My transport of you is strictly a favor.
You do favors for people you're mad at?
I have always been just maddeningly befuddled by people who would rather just like sweep problems under the carpet and pretend the problem doesn't exist instead of addressing it straight on. Of course, I'm a Scorpio, so I'm naturally inclined to resent somebody that I'm mad at. Hello, you did something completely messed up. I'm freaking mad. No, I'm not going to do you a favor.
My father says that almost the whole world is asleep. Everybody you know, everybody you see, everybody you talk to. He says that only a few people are awake, and they live in a state of constant, total amazement.
You know, I've always wanted to be one of those who are truly awake. I'm not sure that I'm always maintaining that, but still it inspires me. For example, at the restaurant scene, Joe is finally awake, and he's living out exactly what Patricia had says later on in the movie.
Who am I? That's the real question, isn't it? Who am I? Who are you? What other questions are there? What other questions are there, really? If you want to understand the universe, embrace the universe, the door to the universe is you.
I think one of the times that I find myself the most awake, but just being aware and marveled, is particularly when I'm teaching my physics classes. I'm teaching quantum mechanics, I'm teaching electric field theory, if I'm teaching gravity, even simple concepts of motion and just distinguishing the details. It's the briefest glimpse into the monumental and marvelous and wondrous, yet still mysterious ways that the universe works. And I'll tell you, not just that part is seeing the students learning, and that's also, I think, also a moment of awakening. And it's just, it's just awesome. Sorry, I just had a little moment there, but. The third thing I want to talk about with Joe Versus Volcano to convince you to check it out is the music. Music in movies can be the difference between a good experience and a great connection to the story. The soundtrack here is a delightful and oftentimes poignant collection of bluesy songs, 40s and 50s pop hits, and original composition from Georges Delerue. So, as mentioned, the movie opens up, and I really like the instrumental warm-up sounds that are going during this part. And then you have the musical theme played over the Once Upon a Time, and what I really like, again, is that music box style that it does. It just really is like a very simplistic and very simplified musical style. It really sets the tone, if you think about it, of what to expect from the whole movie, not just from the opening scenes. So pleasant. Then, of course, a little while after Joe receives his diagnosis, we get to hear Ray Charles just beautifully singing Old Man River. I really felt connected to Joe and his feelings in the moment as Ray's voice is soaring, crying out almost pleadingly.
I'm tired of living, oh, but I'm scared. I'm scared of dying.
Of course, after Joe quits, the movie's going to take a lurch turn almost. I mean, it just brightens up really fast. It's not just brightens up, it quickly becomes more romantic, more festive, with these two really awesome Spanish songs. The first one is at the restaurant scene, and then you have once Joe is on his way to meet with Marshall, you hear this song called Mas Que Nada, and I'll tell you, this is just such an excellent, fun, peppy song. You can't listen to this song and not feel like pepped up afterwards. It's just wonderful to listen to. The nice thing that this song does is it plays throughout his transformation, and it really helps to shake off the drudgery from the early scenes as Joe is starting to, as Marshall puts it, come into focus. One thing that I miss from older movies that are more than a decade or two old, is something I refer to as like lingering moments. You don't see quite so many lingering moments in more modern movies, but in the movies from this era and before, you'd have this just kind of reflection that really helps the story just kind of soak, and we need those lingering moments. You see Marooned Without You, those moments, they really allow us to feel Joe's moment, the scene outside of the doctor's office, the lingering moments. I really enjoy I Cover the Waterfront. It's just a very romantic, almost heart-wrenching song, especially when you consider the lyrics. I think it really connects to the moment with Patricia unconscious and Joe is slowly becoming more delirious as the elements get to him.
Will the one I love be coming back to me?
And then now we arrive at the island, and the music again takes a big shift, which I think is a good shift in this one, right? Because this is now the Waponi culture, and we've got a few minutes of a movie to really make you feel like you understand the culture. I gotta be honest, I really enjoy the scene where Joe and Patricia are being pampered by the Waponis, getting them prepped for their evening, and in my opinion, it's definitely a highlight of the movie. So there you have it. 3 reasons I think you should take a look at Joe Versus the Volcano. It's an unconventional fairy tale with a damsel in distress and a strong, self-confident damsel who is not distressed and actually saves him. 2, it's chock full of deep philosophical questions that are definitely worth considering and reflecting on. And 3, it's got great music. This music is skillfully selected to enhance each important scene. So, in the spirit of the required movie review rating, I give this movie 4.5 out of 5 volcanoes. You see, it's a great, undervalued movie, almost perfect. And the only real problem that I found with it is...
Shark still looks fake.
And that is Joe Versus the Volcano through my eyes. So, thanks everyone for sticking around and watching my very first films with Dr. T. Help me out by clicking like, and if you click on subscribe, it'll be easy for you to find my next Films with Dr. T video. But I'm going to be honest with you, I really like the likes and a little bit of a howl on that, if you will. So I decided that the next Films with Dr. T I'm going to do is called Empire Records. But I wanted to make sure I got this launched first for you. And let me tell you, this has been a lot of fun making this first video. I hope you all enjoyed my vlog, and I look forward to posting more content for you to check out. Thanks for stopping by, film aficionados. Take it sleazy.